Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution. We teach rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me live this evening.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read.
I have I have an audio loop. That's a bad idea. Let's see. Let me mute that other audio so I can unmute this. There we go. You know, technology is a wonderful thing, but sometimes it just gets a little too complicated when you're trying to do this all by myself. But I'm glad you could join me. Those of you who are joining me live, thank you. It's great to see you. It's great to know that you're here. I am looking to see, I've got the Zoom room is up. I'm also looking to see who's available up on, I see YouTube. Where's the Facebook? See if anybody's out here paying attention to me here. Where is it? Show me this. You know, sometimes Facebook likes to make my life a little difficult. I don't know why, but it does. It shows that it's online, so that's good. Let me get the chat up and running. So as usual, please, if you have any questions, if you're in the Zoom room, then you can join me there, and we'll do an actual talk. But if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can use the chat. Just place your questions in the chat and I will get to them after I've kind of gone through today's session, which I'm being a little difficult here. There's the chat app. I want to be able to keep track of the chats. And there we go. So, little bit of housekeeping. All right, I'm still working on this multi-stream live stream. As you can tell, it's still a little clunky getting it set up and trying to do all this at once. I appreciate your patience. I do want to send you over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Please sign up for the newsletter. Any changes I'm making, I'm announcing in the newsletter generally first, either in the monthly newsletter or a special broadcast. I try not to spam you. I mean, actually, I don't spam you. I send you about one message a month unless there's something special coming up. So please sign up for the newsletter. Best way to keep in touch. If you want, you can check that little box and you'll be notified when there's a checkbox that says be notified when I release new content. So when my recordings come out, when they hit the website and all that, they will be emailed to you a link so you can have access to them. Another announcement, later this month, I'm actually doing an event, a free webinar on the presidential election and electoral college. Now, I'm getting the impression a lot of people are really kind of sick and tired of the election, and I can't blame you. It's about enough to make me nauseated. But there's an important point, and I'm getting a lot of questions about how the elections run, about the electoral college, about will Nancy Pelosi be president? Is it possible for her to be president on January 7th? What happens if states don't get their elections in? All of that. And I will go through in that webinar, I will go through how we actually elect a president. No, it was not what you were taught in school. No, it's not what the media is telling you or the pundits are telling you. I will tell you how we actually elect a president. I'll tell you not only what the Electoral College is, why we have it, why it's so important that we have it. And I'll talk a bit about what happens if there are problems during the election. What does the state do if they're having a problem with their election? How does that impact the electors? All of that. So it's a lot of good information. If you cannot make it live, please register anyway. It will, because what I'll do is send out an email. Once I've got the recording edited and uploaded, I'll send out an email where you can watch it and review it if you can't make it live, or if you just want to watch it again or just go over parts of it and see what's going on. So with that, hello, Dwayne. Glad you could join me. Still bouncing around a little bit here, but that's okay. So with that, sometimes coincidence, providence, I guess, would be our way our forefathers put it. It's very interesting. See, not 20 minutes after I posted or I created this live stream event where we're going to talk about juries and grand juries, I get a phone call from a friend of mine saying, hey, could you do a live stream? Could you do a video on grand juries, and he has some ideas, and I'm going to try and weave some of those in, at least as I understand it, and we'll discuss about that. Because, by the way, if you're out there, I've actually thought about your thoughts for a while, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. But this is where we get together. Hey, I got Joanne, I got Brody. I'm glad you're here. Hey, Dustin. Hey, good. Dustin's here because I really want this to become more than just me talking at a camera. I want this to be interactive. I want this to be a group. I want this to be a place that we can get together and understand, that we can read and study and understand the Constitution and how important it is. And most importantly, how we can use what it actually says to protect our rights, to protect the rights of our families, and to live free in this crazy time we live in right now. So with that, what I'm going to do is I want to talk about the presidential, I'm sorry, wrong episode. I'm going to talk about juries and grand juries. So let me do this. Let me share. I've got a couple quotes I'm going to pop up. I just need to make sure I've actually got those. All right. So juries and grand juries. Now, we're going to talk about the Fifth and Sixth Amendment and what they say about juries and grand juries. But I know you're probably like me, right? You know, you get that jury summons in the mail, and, well, at least I used to go, oh, man. Because let's face it, jury duty is a pain in the butt. It disrupts our lives. We have to take time off from work. Some of us, you know, if you're on a salary, that's not as big a deal. But if you be paid by the hour and you can't work because you're on jury duty, well, that costs you money, and it's inconvenient and it's difficult. And I know, you know, it's led to this idea that you know, getting out of jury duty has really become an art form. So of course, the courts, because juries are so important, the courts come up with ways to stop people from getting out of jury duty. And as soon as they do that, people come up with a new way to get out of jury duty. Basically, what it means is we've almost gotten to the point where you're not tried by a jury of your peers. You're tried by 12 people who couldn't figure out how to get out of jury duty. And that's sad. And hey, I used to do the same thing. I would actually enjoy serving on jury duty. Well, maybe not enjoy. I would be willing, more than willing, to serve in a jury. So anybody from my county wants to send me that little jury summons, I will show up. And not just because it's legal, but because juries and jury duty is extremely important if you want to live in a free country. And we'll get to that as we go a little farther. Let me tell you a little bit about jury duty. I've been summoned several times, but there was only once I was actually called to serve on a jury. You know, if you've been through it, right, you sit in the room and then they call your number, and they take, in my case, they take a dozen of us, they put us up in the jury box, and the lawyers interview you. I think voir dire is the official term for it, but they ask you questions. Now, so I'm sitting in the back row and I'm watching all of this, and the gentleman sitting right in front of me, the lawyer comes up and asks, I think he was the prosecutor, said, could you convict someone on the evidence of one witness? And he gave this really platitudinous, ridiculous answer, not important, at least not to this subject. Now, by the time they got around to me, they asked me the exact same question. Could I convict someone on basically on the evidence of just one witness? To which I answered no. And for some reason, the lawyer went on, and it's like, well, no, not just one witness. There has to be more than just the word of one person. You know, you've got to have, yes, you know, I believe you should have 2 or 3 witnesses. Is there evidence? How good is that evidence? I'm sitting there arguing with the lawyer about what constitutes sufficient evidence to be considered a witness to a crime. Next thing I know, I'm arguing with the judge. I'm sitting there in the jury box. I've got the lawyer on one side, the judge on the other side, trying to understand, what are you talking about? It's simple. I cannot convict somebody simply on the testimony of one witness. There has to be other things, and that evidence has to be more than simply hearsay. It has to be positive evidence. And I ended up getting called. I then ended up getting dismissed for other reasons, but That was the one experience where I was actually going to serve on a jury and ended up not serving on the jury because of other things. But at that time, to me, jury duty was little more than a nuisance. I was working in corporate America. Taking one day off to go to answer the jury summons was another thing. But my life involved travel. My work involved travel. I traveled the entire Northeast. I traveled the entire country at times. And to disrupt that schedule was really problematic to me. And other than the fact that the company was legally bound to let me go, it really disrupted things that were going on. I understand. But let's talk a little bit about this idea of juries and grand juries and why they are so important. And believe it or not, I'm going to start with the Constitution. Now, the idea of juries and grand juries doesn't come from the Constitution. It doesn't originate from the Constitution, but the Constitution talks about it. So let me do this. Let me share my desktop here and let me pop up a slide. Close that window down because I don't need to be looking at myself. Okay. No person shall be held for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment of indictment of a grand jury. Hang on a second, where's my mouse went nuts. There we go. There we go. Let's try this again. Okay. So, all right. So in other words, in this country, you cannot be answered for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, basically a serious crime, what we would tend to think of as a felony. You can't be held for a felony except on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Well, what is a grand jury? Right? A grand jury is a panel of citizens that is convened by a court to decide whether it is appropriate for the government to indict, to proceed with a prosecution, against someone suspected of a crime. By the way, that comes from the Free Legal Dictionary. In other words, the purpose of a grand jury is to review the government's case. Think of it this way. Let's say you get charged with an infamous crime. Since right now, I believe studies say that the average citizen commits 3 to 6 federal felonies a day, there certainly could be a situation where you're charged with a crime. Now, if it's an infamous crime, before you can be taken to court, the prosecutor, the DA, has to go before the grand jury to get an indictment. That grand jury is made up of you and me and our neighbors. This is a very important check on the government's power. See, before the government can charge you with a serious crime, they have to get the citizens to get their permission. In other words, they have to take their case and they have to lay their case out before the grand jury, the citizens of the grand jury, to make it reasonable, to believe it's reasonable for them to actually proceed. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I know that grand juries work a little different than regular juries. For example, if they want to charge you, neither you nor your lawyer are allowed in the grand jury. You're not allowed to see what happened. You're not allowed to hear what went on. Those grand jury proceedings are private, and they're private for a very good reason. See, if they do not issue an indictment, you don't want your name on some public record. If if the government says, "Hey, I want to charge you with a crime," but they don't make their case, you don't want on the news that, "Hey, so and so was brought before a grand jury, but they got found not to be indicted, so everything's okay." You don't want to hear that. But it's still up to the people. A grand jury is part of the jury system. It could be part of your jury duty. If you get summoned for jury duty, you could be sitting on a grand jury. And it's your job to listen to the government's case and determine whether it's appropriate for them to proceed, whether they have the evidence, there's enough there to go. Now, it's not the same as, you've got to get beyond a reasonable doubt. There just has to be a preponderance of evidence. It looks like there's enough for them to have a case, which means it's really sad when I think that it's a common saying that a good prosecutor can indictment on a ham sandwich? See, the American people have no idea. They go to sit and they sit in that jury room, and guess what? They listen to a judge, and a judge says your job is to do this, this, and that, and they have no clue what their job is beyond what the judge tells them. So if you're sitting on a grand jury, you hold the life of someone in your hand. Their life is going to change if you issue an indictment. Now, that means that you really should take that seriously. You literally hold, because you think of it from your standpoint. You're going about your life and everything is good. You may not know that the government's even prosecuting you. You may not know that they've got an investigation. You know nothing that's going on. And then a bunch of people sit in a room. They listen to a prosecutor, and the prosecutor makes a case that says, yeah, we're going to indict you. And your life gets turned upside down. You have to hire a lawyer. By the way, lawyers like to get paid. If you can't afford a lawyer, yes, the government will provide you one, but do you really think you're going to get a really good lawyer that way? Now, don't get me wrong. Public defendants work very hard. They are, in most cases, I believe they're probably overworked, underpaid. It's not easy, but that's kind of my point. It's hard for them to provide a defense, especially if it involves something complicated. Think of the McCluskeys, the couple in St. Louis who have been indicted in effect for protecting their home because they did so with firearms. Now, I'm not real thrilled with the way they handled their firearms. I think tactically they made less than stellar decisions. I think their muzzle discipline, their trigger discipline was really kind of weak. I hope I would have done it better if I were in that situation. But a group of people, a group of fellow citizens, listened to the prosecutor and agreed that he had sufficient evidence to move forward. He or she had sufficient evidence to move forward to prosecute them. So that their lives weren't overturned enough already. Now they're going to spend the next 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years dealing with this case for effectively just defending their property. Defending, and not even just defending their property. As I understand it, they were being threatened. They were talking, the people there were those in that crowd that were threatening to burn their house down. If you're in a house and it's being burnt down, that's an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. Then my question is, and again, I wasn't in the grand jury room. I don't know what was going on. I don't know what evidence was presented. So I don't know how I would have come down if I were in that situation. But it makes me think, and hopefully it makes you think, how important it is to take that position seriously. Put yourself in the shoes of the McCluskeys and ask, if you were in their situation, would you want people, I think it's usually 24 people that just couldn't figure out a way to get out of jury duty? Now, so that's the grand jury, right? In order to be charged with a capital or infamous crime, there has to be a grand jury, and the grand jury has the duty of looking at the case that the prosecutor provides and determining whether to issue an indictment. I believe they also have the ability to issue a no bill, meaning no, there's not enough evidence here, but there's also the ability to actually rebuke the prosecutor. If they believe that the prosecution is malicious, they actually have the ability to not simply say no, but actually rebuke the prosecutor in that case. That to me is real interesting. That's an important part. So let's say you go through the indictment. Now we get into what's called a petty jury. Now there are actually two. There's two types of cases we'll deal with, and the first is a criminal prosecution. Again, grand juries are about criminal charges. You don't have a grand jury in a civil case. If someone is suing you, there's no grand jury. This is about protecting you from an overly prosecutorial government, right? So the Sixth Amendment says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right of a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. So yeah, we use the term a jury of your peers. That's not entirely true. First of all, you have a right to a speedy trial. The government doesn't get to drag their feet. They don't. The idea is that you can make the process the punishment. If the government has a weak case, they can simply drag things out, and drag things out, and drag things out. Meanwhile, you're shelling out money for lawyers. You're having to take time off of work to deal with proceedings. You may lose your job. You may not be able to advance in your job. Your life is basically on hold and under this microscope during the time of the trial. So we want it to be a speedy trial, but we also want it to be a public trial. And again, for one primary reason, I believe it's so that the government can't use any shenanigans. If the government does something, it's on public record. It can be seen. It can be viewed. They can. You can even have others. Then you think about it. You're sitting at a defense table. You've got defense lawyers, and you've got this public record of what's going on. There may be others that have information that they can say, wait a second, the government lied here, or yeah, the government didn't give you the entire story, or other things that may help your defense. Right. So it's got to be public, because we don't want secret trials. We don't want kangaroo courts. We don't want star chambers, right, where you're brought in and everything's secret, everything's on hush hush, which is kind of why I dislike FISA courts. Now, I do kind of understand, there are situations where you may not want certain information made public, but I get real nervous when we start having non-public trials, because they're just rife for mischief. So we're talking about a jury, an impartial jury. You have a right to an impartial jury. That's why, if you ever sat on a jury, do they ask, do you know the defendant? Have you had any business dealings with the defendant? Have you followed the case in the news? They want you to be impartial. Your job as a juror is not to be for the prosecution or for the defense, but to be a judge of the facts of the case, and to do so impartially. Let's see. And it's done in the state and district where the crime has been committed. So it's not necessarily a jury of your peers. If you live in New York and you commit a crime in California, okay, you're not tried in New York, you're tried in California. It's supposed to be people in that locale. Generally, it's the county level, right? So it's the state and the county where the crime actually happened. Now, there are times, as I understand it, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but that may be adjusted for impartiality's sake, right? Where if, think about it. If you were in downtown Minneapolis or Portland, do you really think you'd get a fair trial if it related to, say, rioting? Depends on which side you're on, right? So it could be very weird and district and stuff like that. So again, your job, if you sit on a jury, is now you're going to be reviewing this case. Now, again, back to the Free Legal Dictionary, says the traditional approach in U.S. court systems is for the jurors to be the triers of fact, while the judge is considered the interpreter of the law and the one who will instruct the jury on the applicable law. This gets into a very interesting point. See, the way the legal system is, when all the evidence is presented, the judge will issue instructions to the jury. And remember, it's the judge's job, while the prosecution and the defense is giving their cases, to make sure they follow the rules. And that's primarily what a judge does, right? Make sure that they're not giving bad information. They're not think of it this way. We've all watched a courtroom drama, right? A lawyer says something, a lawyer asks a question, the opposing counsel, I object, and why? I object on these grounds. And it's the role of the judge to determine, okay, is that objection right or not? Is the objecting lawyer objecting against something that actually is wrong? You know, oh, this evidence is impermissible because it was not obtained with a proper warrant. That's the role of the judge. Is a lawyer asking a question that is out of bounds? That's the role of the judge. Then the judge says, okay, now he's judging the law, right? He's a trier of law. And then the jury is supposed to be the trier of fact, meaning the job of the jury is to look at the facts of the case and see if the prosecution made their case. And again, we're focusing primarily on criminal cases at this point. We'll talk a little bit about civil cases in a minute. So you're sitting there and you're listening to all this information. And the judge says, okay, this is what the law means. Now, your job is to go and decide, did the prosecution make that case? But see, there's a little tweak in there. See, jury nullification, back to the Free Legal Dictionary, jury nullification occurs when the jury substitutes its own interpretation of the law and or disregards the law entirely in reaching a verdict. We're getting into the case of what are called the triers of law. See, triers of fact determines if the evidence proves that the person charged committed the crime. The trier of law determines if the law is applicable to the case. Now, again, I don't know all the facts. That's a very interesting point and I'm going to use the McCluskeys again because they've been in the news recently. They're a couple dealing with this. The question is the law that they're being charged with violating properly applicable to the case at hand? Now, that may be the current approach. The current approach is the jury deals with the facts, the judge deals with the law, but is that the traditional? I don't know how traditional that is. See, if we go back to 1828 and Noah Webster, we read that a jury is a number of freeholders selected in the manner prescribed by law and paneled and sworn to inquire into and try any matter of fact and to declare the truth on evidence given them in the case. Grand juries consist usually of 24 freeholders at least and are summoned to try matters alleged to indictments. Petty juries consist usually of 12 men attend courts to try matters of fact in civil causes and decide both the law and the fact in criminal prosecutions. This is the decision of a petty jury is called a verdict. So the petty jury in civil cases, in other words, if you're sued or you sue someone, that's a civil case, right? They're there to try to declare the truth of the evidence, be the trier of facts. You had a business dealing, someone broke a contract, you go there and with your lawyers say, here's what the contract says, here's what they did, here's the evidence of it. Jury, you come to your conclusion, you get to your verdict. However, in a criminal case, our founding fathers said it's not simply enough for the jury to try the facts of the case. They are there to try the law itself. Now, this is really important because there are several judges will tell you jury nullification is illegal. Law schools, all the legal scholars tell you that jury nullification is illegal. It's wrong, but that's not what our founding fathers created. They wanted the jury to try both the law and the facts in criminal cases. Why? For the very same reason they wanted a grand jury before you were charged with an infamous or capital crime. They want the people to look at this crime and not only determine, okay, were the facts made, was the case made, but does this law really apply here in this situation? You see, what we're talking about with jury nullification is the ability of a jury to nullify the application of a law in a specific case. We are not talking about juries overturning laws. That some of the hyperbole that gets spread about, no. What we're talking about is, in this case, does this law apply? Is this law just? And even if it's constitutional. And that's a very important point. I don't want to, there are several cases where some people say, well, the jury nullified the law by not finding the defendant guilty, and they may have done it for who knows whatever reasons. Right? You think of the O.J. Simpson trial. But when you sit on a jury, you have the life of the defendant in your hands. And you have to look at it and say, well, okay, not only did they commit the crime they're charged with, but is that crime really just? Is it something that the legislature that wrote the crime actually has the authority to punish? I'll give you a perfect example. It's a federal crime for a felon to possess a firearm. There's just one problem. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government the authority to enact such laws. It's a federal crime to commit murder. It's a federal, people talk about having the federal law enforcement go in and quell the riots or, arrest the people who are not simply destroying federal property, but private property as well. Well, there's a problem. That law is unconstitutional. So even though somebody might be charged with a federal crime of, looting and private property destruction and assault, if that goes to a federal court and they charge them with that federal crime, that law, well, it's unjust. It's unconstitutional. The federal government has no authority under the Constitution to write a law to do that. Now, there may be circumstances. I don't like dealing in complete hypotheticals, but I could see a situation where someone could look at this and say, wait a second, the government is trying to enforce a law that is not legally allowed to. It was not legally allowed to pass that law. And we all know, as we've talked about before, Alexander Hamilton and Justice Marshall said that any law, any act of the legislature contrary to the Constitution is void. So if you're sitting in that jury room and someone has been charged with a crime and the government has proved its case, but it's a law that's void because it violates the Constitution, what do you do? See, that's the importance of jury duty. The government will investigate the crime. The government will prosecute the crime, but it is up to the people to decide the crime, to decide whether or not to proceed with a crime, if it's a serious crime or a capital crime. And it's up to the people to decide if the crime has not only been committed, but if it's truly a crime. So when a judge tells the jury that they're not allowed to consider the applicability of the law to the case, it's not simply a question of, well, I'm a judge, I know better. They're actually subjugating the will of the people in the jury to either the state or federal government. If we've got an illegal law that's being applied to a citizen, and you said you can't look at it and say, well, the law is illegal, the law is wrong, the law is void. Well, then the will of the jury is now subject to the state. Because if the state passes a law and the courts say it's okay, what happened to we the people? Are we not the masters of our own government? See, jury duty suddenly becomes a lot more important. Now, for Amendment 7 says, in suits at common law where the value and controversy shall exceed $20, the right of the trial by jury shall be preserved. Okay, a suit at common law. We've talked about that. We know what lawsuits are. The common law is that unwritten or common law, something that is not a strict statute, right? Statutory law is what, the legislature writes the law, the executive signs the law, we go through that whole legislative process. That's statutory law. Common law is the more basic stuff. And this has gotten a bit muddled because they've written, statutory law about all sorts of common law things, whether it's pick your topic, right? Murder is common law. You don't have the right to take someone else's life, but it's also statutory law. So here's the point I want to make is in a suit, the trial by jury shall be preserved. So again, the Constitution requires that all civil cases valued over $20 must be tried by a jury unless it is waived by both parties to the suit. So let's say you want to sue Facebook. Everyone's picking on Facebook. You want to sue Facebook. Facebook has the right, and you have the right to a trial by jury. Now, if you say, I don't want a trial by jury, Facebook says, we don't want a trial by jury, fine, that can be waived. But the ability to have a trial by jury must be preserved. It shall be preserved. And oh, by the way, there's an interesting question that comes up. See, now in 1793, $20 in 1793 would be worth about $1,200 today. But you see, the Constitution did not put a cost of living increase in this amendment. So it's literally $20. I don't know anybody that's going to bother going to court for $20, but that's I get asked that sometimes, $20 back then doesn't matter. It says $20, it means $20. And again, just as we saw in the Sixth Amendment, the jury trials place the outcome of the case in the hands of the citizens instead of the government. And that's an important part of our judicial system, right? Our founders wanted to make sure that the people had the tools to keep the government in check. Now, I wrote an article, it's going to come out Monday, talking about what's been going on in Michigan. Here's the interesting part. I wrote the article about the Michigan Supreme Court case, and I asked the question at the end, well, what happens if Governor Whitmer basically ignores the court? And what do we see? We see Governor Whitmer, 2 days later, I'm reading about, well, Governor Whitmer is trying to ignore the court. Now, if the governor says it's illegal for you to open a store, and the court says, no, you don't have the authority to do that, no. But the governor does it anyway, and you open your store in Michigan, and you get charged with a crime. Okay. We see again the importance of putting it in the we the people. But what happens if instead of what if you just get sued? Well, you opened it against. What if you just get sued? Look at how many people are suing their government under, in many cases, under federal law, under 42 USC 1983, I think it is, your ability to sue people for deprivation of rights. Is someone going to sue Governor Whitmer? And do you want that decided by a government judge who pulls a government paycheck? Or do you want that decided by people? Juries and grand juries are a check on the government, but we've treated them so blasé. We ignore them. We avoid this responsibility, and then we wonder why the courts run amok. You see, without the right to a trial by jury, the fate of your case, should you ever be charged, would be in the hands of a judge who works for the government, who gets a government paycheck. The ability to exercise your right to trial by jury places your future, your case, in the hands of people, of other citizens. And they may have a different point of view than the judge. We don't know. But there's one other little tidbit in here that I think is very interesting. And no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise reexamined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Imagine that. If a jury of we the people come to a decision, the government has no authority to reexamine the case except by the rules of common law. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I do understand a couple of things. So a case can be appealed if the trial was mishandled, right? So let's say, I don't know, you're charged, you're sued, you're in court, and they find against you, but you have evidence that the trial wasn't handled properly. Evidence wasn't handled properly. The judge was biased against you. That his application of the law was unfair. You can then go back because you are not re-examining the fact of the jury, but the process that got there. But if a jury says you're guilty or you're not guilty, that's basically it. Unless you can come up with something really, really new, the court cannot re-examine what happened. That you have to show that there's something serious to it. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but again, the idea is if you get found guilty, but wait a second, the judge improperly instructed the jury, or the judge did not or dismissed evidence improperly, you can go back and have that re-examined. It's a very important thing to understand that juries are considered very powerful according to the Constitution, because ultimately the life of citizens are in the hands of juries. Now, I want to check for a couple of questions here because let's see if I got any questions here. I don't have any questions here. Let me check over here. Well, let's see. I got. By the way, Brody, James, Scott, thank you very much. I'm glad you're here. Okay, Dustin brings a point. Says the North Dakota Declaration of Rights states that in cases of libel, the jury has the right to judge both the law and the facts. And in other cases, our Constitution protects our right to judge both the law and the facts. And again, that's a really important point because in North Dakota, they've expanded it to not just criminal cases, but they've put in there the supreme law of the state, the ability for a jury to look at the law and say, no, that law is wrong. Put the people back in control of their government. Let's see. This is exactly what I can. Thank you, James. Excellent, Joanne. Can we question the judge? Before I answer that, Joanne, let me bring up the question that I got asked before I put this on, and that was a question of citizen grand juries. Now, again, this was asked a couple of days ago, and I've really pondered this for a couple of days. But my first thought is, well, what is the purpose of a citizen grand jury? If the purpose of a grand jury is to review the case of the government before proceeding with prosecution, what case is being reviewed before it can be prosecuted? Now, I can see a situation where, let's say, you've got a state where a government official is violating the law, and the prosecutor refuses to prosecute. It happens all the time. When I lived back in upstate New York, there was somebody driving through our town. He got pulled over by a state trooper. He had 8 rounds in his firearm magazine. He went to jail because New York State had passed that stupid, quote unquote, SAFER Act. Now, the DA declined to prosecute. But what happens if, I don't know, if somebody is committing a crime, or and let's take something. It's kind of like from the movies, but we've heard this all the time. Let's say there's an extortion case, right? You're being bullied to do things, and you bring evidence to the DA, and the DA just says, "Nah, I don't think I want to prosecute that." What does a person do? Well, okay, what if he's had a citizen grand jury? What are you going to do? You're going to take the case to a citizen grand jury and say, I want the DA to prosecute this case. Who's going to prosecute the case? That's kind of I hope I'm making sense out of this. Let's say you formed a citizen grand jury, and usually these are, when I hear these talked about, they're formed to charge government officials. Okay, who's going to prosecute the case? Somebody has to present the case to the grand jury. Somebody then has to prosecute the case. I think I understand the ideas behind why you want this. What we really want is, what do we do when the government isn't doing its job to prosecute these crimes? To me, the answer is not to simply bypass the process. It's to either that DA was elected by the people or was appointed by someone who was elected by the people. It's time for the people to hold their elected officials accountable. If you've got a DA that will not prosecute crimes, there's a podcast I listen to, and every day they have what they call their recidivist report. If you listen, you know who I'm talking about. And they take an example of somebody who has been convicted of a crime, and basically the punishment was so ridiculously low that this person was either, was back out on the streets committing even more crimes. What do we do? Well, the answer is you go back to your representative saying, I have a judge or I have a DA that's not doing their job. It's your job to oversee them, investigate, and if necessary, impeach them, hold them accountable. There's another podcast I listen to, and there's one guy in there, the way he describes a republic, I laugh at it and I cry at it. I laugh at it because it's what he's describing is utterly ridiculous, but it kind of matches what we do day in and day out. It's this idea that, it ultimately comes down to the people don't oversee their elected representatives. So I completely understand the desire to hold elected officials accountable, but unless someone comes up with some other information, I think the proper way to do it is not to come up with a new court, which effectively a grand jury would be, a citizen grand jury would be, but to go back to the people we hire and say, listen, if you're not going to do your job, we're going to fire you and find somebody who will. So, okay, let me go back to Joanne here. Can we question the judge's decision? Well, technically, yes. Right. So it depends, if there's an objection and the judge decides and you think they've decided wrongly, you can request, and generally this is done through the lawyer, would say, to reconsider, maybe provide a piece of information. But in that case at that time, no, the judge pretty much rules. Now, that also becomes a purpose for appeal, right? Because most judges don't really like having their opinions overturned. So if, you want to bring in a piece of evidence, it's, the judge says, no, you can't do that. You can then go to a higher court and say, wait a second, this is important information to the determination of guilt or innocence in this case, and the judge acted badly. That's a reason to get to appeal and may grant you a new trial. By the way, that could also be used if there was a history of that as bad behavior, right? So it's sadly in the courtroom, the judge really is the king of that little fiefdom. The judge within the courtroom can do pretty much whatever he or she wants. The remedy is after the fact, which really puts a burden on the defendant, right? Because if you're found guilty, or if you lose a case, you lose a civil suit because of the bad actions, the malfeasance of a judge, and then you have to go back and resue it. It's bad. It's not a perfect system, but to my understanding, pretty much within the trial itself, the judge pretty much rules from the bench, which I'm reviewing a book. Someone asked you to review a book on constitutional law, and it's tough. I'm having it's constitutional law. It's hard for me it's not an easy read, but it's reminding me just how convoluted we've made this mess. And yes, Joanne, even if it's unconstitutional, the Constitution is not a Superman cape. The Constitution is ink on parchment. It's words on a page. It's ideas. And if we hire people that don't hold it in its proper position, we're going to get bad information. But once again, if you've got a judge in a court that does something unconstitutional, your only remedy is to appeal the case and possibly charge the judge with misconduct. That's the way it is. Is it a perfect system? No. But if I believe we had judges that were trained in the Constitution, that understood their role as arbiters of process in their court, that understood it was not, their job was not to influence the jury, but to make sure that the jury, that the rules are followed for how the information is presented to the jury, we'd have a better system. The problem we run into is, as we've moved responsibility higher and higher in the political food chain, in other words, from county to state to federal, we've removed ourselves and our influence from the people who are making these decisions. If you have a bad judge, it is the responsibility of your representative, whether it be at the state or federal level, to punish the judge, to indict the judge, impeach the judge. An impeachment is basically an indictment. To come up and say, these are the times that the judge has behaved badly. Here are the times that he's denied due process, right? Because if it's unconstitutional, what you're being denied is due process. So if a person is denied their rights and their protections under the Constitution, that's a violation of due process. Here's where they've done that. They've violated the law by doing that. By the way, federal law, 18 U.S.C. 242. It is up to our representatives to say, no, judge, that's bad behavior. We're going to charge you with bad behavior, and we're going to have the Senate, either at the state or federal level, to prosecute that, to try that. And if we've made the case, well, then that judge should be removed. But again, the problem is our representatives, they don't care. There is little, in most cases, there's little advantage for a representative to file articles of impeachment. Why? Name me one situation where a representative at the state or federal level has been voted out of office because they failed to impeach a judge or other government agent. Doesn't happen. I believe it was Thomas Jefferson that said, impeachment's a paper tiger, or something to that effect, because it's dependent on we the people holding our representatives accountable and saying, you must do this or you will be fired. It is part of your job description. And if we spent 150 years going, well, we're not going to buy, we know this person's, we know this person's violated the Constitution. We know of judges who have said, no, we don't want to listen to the U.S. Constitution. We want to listen to international law. And that's not, the representatives do nothing about it. Let's face it. If you had a job where you could break every rule in the employee handbook and your boss never said boo, wouldn't you get away with anything? If your employee handbook said you're not going to steal stationery or pens and stuff like that, if it said you're going to file your time card on Friday by 5 p.m., it said you're only going to get, let's say, 2 weeks of vacation. If it said all that and you ignored it and were never held accountable to that, why would you stop? So if I hire a representative and I said, here's your job, I go to Article 1, Section 8 and says, here are the things you're allowed to do. Here's the legislation you're allowed to pass. I say, oh, by the way, here's your job. It says right here at Article 2 that it says in Article 1 that the House has the sole power of impeachment. It says in Article 2 that, you know, the president, vice president, other officers could be impeached for and removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. If it says in Article 3 that judges serve during the duration of their good behavior, and the people we hire, we give them this handbook. It's only 8,000 words. Here's your handbook. That's what you're supposed to do. And when they don't do it, nothing happens. And in fact, not only do they not do it, they say, we're not going to do this, but we're actually going to we're going to bribe the American people. Here's a goodie. Here's another $1,200 stimulus check. Sure, we know the states have ruined your economies. They've destroyed your businesses. They've turned your lives upside down, but here's $1,200 to shut up and just vote for us. We can't be surprised. I mean, I'd love to give you a nice little, you know, oh yeah, do these 3 things and you can overturn what a judge says. It doesn't work that way. We spent 150 years. It's one of the reasons why I focus so much on education and understanding. If we understand our role in a jury, so I can sit in a jury box and I can see a judge that's saying, you know what, this law is not being applied properly. I have the power in that jury room to say no, to decide, will I convict this person based on the evidence that was given and the law that was provided? If I look at that law and say, I'm sorry, that doesn't work, I have that responsibility. It is on my shoulders to do that. And if I simply don't because, well, you know, I don't want to get involved, it's too much work, well, then whose fault is it that things are a mess? Partially mine. And it's partially my fault because for many, many years, that's how I thought. I didn't know what the Constitution said. I didn't care what the Constitution said. For many decades, that was me. And the decisions that I made and what I let happen during that time is partially my fault. But the first thing about recognizing a problem, you got to recognize you have a problem. And then now that I've recognized it and I've educated, I want to help educate others. And Scott says, yes, we've lost our moral compass. You know, the Constitution was made for a moral people. And regardless of where your morals come from, where you believe morals come from, the real question is, do we care about laws? Do we care about what laws actually say? I was debating with someone on Facebook, and this had to do with the Electoral College, and this person seemed to be very upset that presidents were elected who lost this mythical popular vote. There is no popular vote for president. There is no such thing as a federal election. The Federal Election Commission is unconstitutional because there's no such thing as a federal election. But we're back to this person's lack of understanding. So my goal, my charge, and I don't know that I've done it very well, but I try, is to help show this person that if we look at what it actually says, if we start educating ourselves about why we have a jury system, why the jurors in criminal cases are supposed to be triers of both fact and law, why we do all of these things, then moral compass or not, or maybe not moral compass or not, then we could at least, if we may disagree on what is and is not okay, but we can begin looking and saying, I have a standard that says, if the law says this, then I want to apply it. If the law is wrong, let's not forget the law. Let's not ignore the law. Let's fix the law. And I agree. I believe we should fix any law that says jury nullification is wrong should be fixed. It is up to the jury to decide, ultimately, is this law applicable or not? Okay. Yes, we need, Joanne, yes, we need to educate both the people who hold office and the regular citizens. I see it all the time, right? We need term limits. We need this change. We need that change. Do you know what never changes in any of those scenarios? the people who are actually voting. Now, I have this thing against, and I know I'm in the minority, at least in most of the political circles I tend to hang out in, when I say I think term limits are a bad idea. So I went from being pro-term limit to kind of antithetical to actually thinking term limits are a bad idea. Look at it this way. All I have to do in, 2012, right, when President Obama was talking to President Medvedev in his term as the Russian president, and he told him in what was supposed to be a cold mic to tell Putin not to worry after the election, he can be more flexible. Why? Because he's effectively a lame duck. He's not up for re-election again. And he knows it's really pretty hard as a president to be impeached. What happens when your representative is 2 years as a lame duck? They can't get reelected, at least not to that office. What reason do they have to listen to the people anyway? The people can't vote for them again, which is the other part of the problem I have with term limits. And that is, we think about term limits about limiting the person in office. What you're really doing is limiting the choice of the people who are voting. You're saying, we don't like the way you're voting wrong, so we're going to make it illegal for you to vote the way you want because we think it's wrong. And I think that's wrong. I would much rather educate and say, educate the people to say, rather than saying you can't vote for someone after they served a certain amount of time because we don't like the way you've done it, how about we have a better educated people that say, okay, is the person you want to elect to office, I don't care how long they've been there, are they fulfilling their oath to support the Constitution or not? If they are, why would I want to get rid of them? If they're not, why do I want them there in the first place? Yes, the representatives do what they can to manipulate the Constitution. Lawyers do it. Everybody does it. Everybody, not just even, I would say almost everybody, intentionally or unintentionally, manipulates the Constitution to get what they want. I say that because in most of the discussions I have, people have an end goal that they want to get to, and they're trying to find a way to make the Constitution say that. Rather than look at what the Constitution says, then seeing if what they want to do fits that. And again, term limits is a perfect example, right? We went from, we term limited the president. Why? Because the Republicans got tired of having FDR win elections. And when they finally were in power, they passed a law, an amendment to the Constitution, to limit the president to 2 terms. They didn't do it because of some altruistic reason. They did it because they couldn't beat FDR, and they didn't want that to ever happen again. It's most people, and again, in many cases, I believe in most cases that people do it out of ignorance. They don't know, or they've been taught some idea about the Constitution, not what the Constitution actually says. So that's where you get things like, well, I want a national popular vote because they've been told the Electoral College is racist and evil. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist, but they've been told. They're ignorant. They don't know. And the best way to help someone who doesn't know is to help educate them. Now, can I force them to learn? No, but I can provide information if they're interested. Yes, we've lost our checks. We've lost the most important check and balance there is. We've lost the fact that the American people are supposed to check their government. We talk about, you've got, the president and Congress and the Supreme Court and their checks and balances. That's one type. You have the states as the parties to the compact of the Constitution are supposed to check the federal government. But ultimately, it is we, the people, who are supposed to check the government, federal government, state government, county government, local government, and we have not done it. We've been taught to be subjects to government rather than citizens and the government's master. Just look at the 3,000-page bills they come up with. Yeah, there's an old saying, right? If you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, baffle them with let's call it barnyard substance. Why do you think they make 3,000-page bills? Do you think it takes 3,000 pages to say what they want to say? No, it's 3,000 pages so they can hide stuff in it because they know people won't read it. And they know, the National Defense Authorization Act is a perfect example. So by Constitution, you cannot fund the military for more than 2 years. It is illegal to pass a funding measure for the military for more than 2 years. So every 2 years, they have to come up with the National Defense Authorization Act. They got to fund the military. Well, nobody wants to vote against funding the military. So if I want you to fund the military, if I want to pass some bill that I think is something that's it's unconstitutional, it's unpopular, whatever, why not slip it into the NDAA? Because it's going to be really hard for people to vote against the NDAA. By the way, for those of you who have asked if I would serve in Congress, that's one of the reasons why you don't want me serving in Congress, because I guarantee you I'd be voting against the NDAA. I'd be voting against all these subsidies. I'd be the new, I'm not a doctor, but was it Ron Paul used to be called Dr. No, because his answer to everything was no. That'd be me. My answer to everything is no. All right? No. You show me where it's authorized. You want to give me a nice clean bill, but they don't want clean bills because Republicans, Democrats, Independents, you name it, pretty much everyone up there says, okay, you've got 535 members of Congress between the House and the Senate. You have 535 people with their own agenda. I'm surprised the bills are only 3,000 pages because each one, if I've got 535, each of them just comes up with a 4-page thing they want to do. Right? That's over 2,000 pages right there. No wonder these things are monstrous because everybody's sticking their stuff in there. We are the term. Well, Josh, we're supposed to be the term limits. And again, if you don't think a person should be serving for more than 3 terms, then stop voting for them for more than 3 terms. But you've got to convince. It can't just be you. You've got to convince your neighbors that 3 terms is enough. And that comes really hard. If you find somebody that's really, really, really good, you don't want to do that. You don't want to stop voting for them after 3 years. But the convincing people, we're back to the start, the basic process of understanding that a representative represents you. Whatever they do, they're doing in your name and by your authority. I worry less about how long they do it than how well they're doing it. It's the shell game. It's the magic trick, right? Ooh, term limits, that'll fix the problem. Meanwhile, all these people, men and women alike, all these representatives, all thhave senators, they're playing all sorts of games and shenanigans right here off screen that you can't see because they've got you focused going, oh, term limits are bad. These people have been in office way too long. Really? I look at it this way. I used to fly. When I was a teenager, I actually thought about becoming a pilot. I love flying. I wish I could get back into flying. There are many reasons why I can't, but I wish I could. But the next time, if you fly anywhere, the next time you fly, you take a look at your pilots. Now, some of the more experienced pilots, they're required to retire after a certain age. Now, a commercial airline pilot has to take a physical every 6 months that you and I probably could not pass. I don't mean it's, the old joke was see lightning, hear thunder, get your license. No, these guys go through a serious physical every 6 months in order to maintain their commercial license. They're in excellent health. If they can do the job, I'm happy. How would you have liked to have been on that plane that landed in the Hudson and found out that rather than Captain Sullenberger, an experienced pilot, you had somebody who, well, they were just younger. Experience is a good thing as long as they're doing the job properly. Which books do you think would be a good place to start with? Well, Brody, there's a couple. If you've done nothing with the Constitution at all, if this is your first foray, then I would suggest you start out with a book I have called Read the Constitution in 30 Days. It's available on Amazon. It's available on the website, in the shop. Um, it's you can it. I picked 30 days because I didn't think anybody would believe me if I said read the Constitution in half an hour. You know, half an hour is too short. I thought 7 days people wouldn't really believe me. Read the Constitution in 30 days. I talk about, read and study the Constitution. John Jay's quote, right? Every member of the state ought diligently read and study. Read the Constitution in 30 days. That's the read part. In 5 minutes a day, you'll have read the Declaration and the Constitution, and you'll have, for each day, I have like a 1-paragraph comment, right? So you're going to read a little bit, and I'll make a comment about something that you've read, and in 30 days, you've read it. And if you've done absolutely nothing, that's the place to start. That's the read. When you're ready to go into the study, then get the main book, the Constitution Study. That's the deeper dive. That goes through, it still goes through the Declaration of the Constitution, but rather than just reading it, we're going to get in and talk about all these subjects. In fact, a lot of the material I pulled for this, I pulled out of my book because I wrote about juries and grand juries when I talked about the Fifth and Sixth Amendments and Seventh Amendment. So that's where you want to get down deep and dirty. And if you have a group you want to start, if you want to do your own study, the book, the Constitution Study, that's a great place to work with, because you can go clause by clause and have discussion points. So, if you read, for example, if you read the Fifth Amendment where it talks about grand juries, and I describe grand juries and I go in there, that becomes a great place to talk and discuss, and what does this mean and how do we deal with that? So that'd be my recommendation there. We don't like we must vote them out. Yeah, part of living in a free country means you don't get your way all the time. We live in a society where we must live together, and by default, the majority rules. So the reason we're not a democracy, by the way, is so that your rights aren't subject to majority rule. But as far as picking our leaders, it's majority rule. And yeah, it's an uphill struggle. You've got decades of education and tradition working against us. But if we start looking at the facts, we look at the details, we start looking at the original laws. When I ran my Constitution study back in New York, my first Constitution study, every night we met, I got 2 questions. Some variation, the same 2 questions. It was always, if the Constitution says this, why do we do that? The answer is because the American people don't know any better, and they don't hold their elected officials accountable. The second question is, what do we do about it? And my answer is always, we need to find better representatives. Think of it this way. Look at every piece of legislation that comes out of the House. Look at how your representative voted for it. Now imagine, instead of a yay or a nay, that was yay and your name. And that was nay and your name. Would you be proud? Would you be willing to stand up and with pride say, yes, I put my name to that. I put my name to that vote. Well, if not, then we don't want to vote for that person. But if it's simply, if that's as far as you're going to go, then, you've kind of gone through kindergarten and said, I'm ready to go out in the world. It's not enough for you to simply, yes, we need to vote, but it needs to be we. We need to help educate people to help them understand. And again, I'm kind of learning this. I'm still working on this. It's something I'm trying to teach myself. Is I don't want to convince them I'm right. I want to educate them. I want to present them with facts and help them come to the right decision themselves. I think that's a very important point that I'm still struggling to learn. Right? My first reaction is, I don't, you disagree with me. I want to prove I'm right. But I think we're much more effective if we say, okay, but here's the facts and here are the details, and help people come to their own conclusion that maybe we're more likely to right. Term limits go against the spirit of Republican government. Yes, it does. It takes away our representation. We don't like them. We must vote them out. again, I tend to not like the word right. Like, my question is very simple: Do you uphold your oath to support the Constitution or not? If you do, then I will consider voting for you. If you do not, you're not qualified. What if the legislature refused to do their duty and the AG is aiding and abetting and correcting? Well, okay. Again, New Mexico, I was talking about this in Michigan. What do we do? What do you do if your employee refuses to follow the rules that you've established for them? And Brody, what I'm trying to do is rephrase your question to help open up a concept. If your representative in the legislature is not doing their duty, if your employee is not doing what you hired them to do, what do you do about it? I'll paraphrase a story I heard from somebody else. Let's say you own a McDonald's and you hire somebody to be the fry guy. Their job is to make French fries. That's their whole job. They show up, they make French fries. What do you do if your guy doesn't make French fries? Maybe they don't show up on time. Maybe they're not really getting, they don't put the fries in when they're supposed to. Maybe they're burning the fries. Maybe they decide they don't want to be the fry guy. They want to be the burger guy, and they decide, what would you do if your employee that you hired to make fries either refused to make fries or was really bad at making fries? You'd fire him. We're back to the same situation, right? There are basically three levels we can deal with. We have to, we have to hold our representatives accountable. We have to be willing to fight in court to maintain our rights. We have to be willing to stand up to both. We have to be willing to stand up to government when they infringe on our rights. So when you're talking about, and again, I'm not sure what you're talking, the specifics of the corruption in New Mexico, but the example I used with Michigan, right? I've got a governor who implemented unconstitutional orders that was confirmed by the court. The court said, and they gave all their evidence for it by understanding by both Alexander Hamilton and the Supreme Court, any act that is contrary of a delegated authority, contrary to their commission, is void. It's empty. It's valueless. That means, and I put this in my article, even before I learned about Governor Whitmer challenging, trying to get around the court's opinion. I told the people, I wrote my article to the people of Michigan that they need to be willing to stand up. If the governor still insists on these orders, you need to be willing to say, no, that order is void. I'm not paying any attention to it. And if you try to enforce that, then I'll be more than happy to call the FBI and press criminal charges, not simply civil charges, criminal charges. And that gets into the whole thing that I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time on, but see, the thing with a civil charge is the taxpayer pays if they lose. Criminal charges, the person goes to jail, so that's different. Agree on that valuation of term limits, but then make it so multiple people can be on a ticket. 2 mega corporations. Okay, yeah. So another plug for my webinar, it's going to be the 24th. Part of the problem we have is we've let the parties corrupt the system at the state level. When we talk about presidential elections, we even, the parties, George Washington basically said parties will be the destruction of the nation. He referred to them as factions, but it's the same concept, right? These private entities, these private groups, we've put them in control, and they're manipulating the process. And I say we've done that because guess who passed these laws? That's right. It was our representatives. So I totally agree. My personal preference, and I'm assuming we need choices, not just one person on the ballot. Absolutely. I believe that anybody that wants to run should run. If the way I look at it is if I'm drawing a blank on his name, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders lost the Democratic nomination. he should run anyway. The problem is the system is set up so that if you're not a part of the major parties, it becomes very hard to get your name on the ballot. That should be changed, but that's a state issue. That's an issue we need to deal with in the states. It's not a federal issue. Yes, people have been taught we have a democracy. I get that all the time. It makes my head want to explode. Cheating on elections is a whole other thing, and it's nothing new. People have been cheating on elections for as long as there have been elections. We need at least 10 years of Dr. Knows. Maybe, yeah, I kind of understand the sentiment. I think if we get people's understanding that we want to hire people that are going to take every move they make, every decision they make gets filtered through, does the Constitution give me or my branch of government the authority to do that? Yes or no? That becomes like the very first step. And I always bring this up, right? When they were trying to pass the Affordable Care Act, and a reporter asked Nancy Pelosi, where in the Constitution does Congress get the authority to write this legislation? Her response was, are you kidding me? Now, to me, that means she's immediately disqualified from holding office. In fact, if I had been in Congress, I would have filed for sanctions, possibly impeachment, because she swore an oath to support the Constitution that says the federal government can only do what's specifically delegated in that Constitution, and she is blatantly ignoring it. But most people are not taught that's how government is supposed to work. So she turns around and promises all these people wonderful things. Just put me in office and I'll promise you anything you want. It's like the Wizard of Oz, right? They come out from, they're behind the curtain. Yes. Oh, great. Wonderful Oz. We'll give you anything. We'll do anything. You're running out of money. We'll give you money. You don't like what that person said about you. We'll make that illegal. That's what we focus, because the American people have been taught through tradition and in many cases through education that this bribery system is how the system is designed to work. Maybe a live stream on all representatives and or fair people press. Scott, not entirely sure what you're talking about, but if you have an idea for a program, let me know. Contact me through the website. We'll talk about some details and see if we can make it work. A big hill, but every day more states are flexing their true power. It is a very big hill. Let's face it. We spent at least 150 years making this mess. It's going to take a while to dig us out. But, it's interesting. I posted an article a few weeks ago asking the simple question, can some good come out of this COVID nonsense? And at the time, what I was focusing on, people seeing just how corrupt the public education system had become. You had the public education. They didn't want parents seeing what was being taught in the classroom. Now, when I was in 5th grade, my mother volunteered. I went to public school, right? My mother volunteered in the classroom. Now we have educators, and they're on Twitter and Facebook saying, "Oh, no. It would be bad for the parents." I mean, we've created this safe area where we can deconstruct all the stuff that children have been taught. We don't want the parents interfering with that. That's opening the eyes in education. I think seeing the damage that can be done by an out of control government, and again, most of it has been done at the state and local level, but people are starting to open up going, wait a second, these business licensing laws are out of control. It gives the government too much power over us. It's time for us to learn. Maybe. I still think it's going to take a lot of work, but it's that, that little bit of light that says maybe there's an end of the tunnel. These people are their employees. Absolutely, Bobby. These people, your representatives, your senators, they are your employees. Absolutely right. All right. So Bobby wrote, the main thing people need to remember is these people are their employees, and they need to think what what they would do if their boss only gave them an employee review every few years and rehired or fired them. They need the guidance as to what we expect from them. I agree, but I look at it a different way. Yes, they are our employees, and every election cycle is their job review. And you're right, we need to educate them, and the best way to educate them is to actually do it. Now, I confuse most of the elected people I deal with, and I went down and talked to my sheriff. My sheriff's not up for election, by the way, but with all the craziness going on, I wanted to sit down and talk with the man and see if we were on the same wavelength. Thankfully, yes, we are pretty much on the same wavelength when it comes to rights and protections and the role of the sheriff and the sheriff deputy. I told him, I said, listen, the main thing I want from you is when I pick up the phone and dial 911 and a deputy shows up, that deputy understands that their primary job is to protect the rights of people there. Not to be a stooge for the state or for the feds. He or she is there to protect the rights of the people. That's what I want to make sure you're educating your people to do. And we agreed. We had a wonderful conversation. I recommend everybody meet with their sheriff if you can. It's if for no other reason, it gives you the answer to that question. Of do they understand their role? Tells you a lot about whether or not you want to vote for this person when they come up for re-election. We should not be doing this the November before the election. We should not be doing this the year of the election. We should be aware. We should be meeting our representatives, our senators, and explaining to them what we expect of them, and that if they follow the rules that the Constitution sets forth, we will support them. And I told that to the sheriff. I said, listen, I'm asking you to have your deputies protect my rights out in the field. I will stand with you when that becomes difficult, right? So if something comes up, if there's a problem, and you're upholding the Constitution, you're upholding your oath, I will stand with you. I will help your, I said, if you need something, let me know. It could be my understanding of the Constitution. It could be the work I do as a preacher. It could just be the fact that I live out in the middle of nowhere. If your deputies need something, I am more than willing to stand with you as long as you're upholding the Constitution. We need to be willing to do that. You want to make a sheriff's day? Picture someone like a Sheriff Mack, all right? Someone, or the chief of police in Morton, Washington, right? Men and women who are standing up and doing the right thing, and they are getting attacked left, right, and center for it. Just imagine how that man and woman would feel standing up at some press conference, having the news media just pummel them with ridiculous, stupid questions and accusations, and have the people of their county stand up and stand with them. It says, no. He's following the law. He or she's doing what's right, and we stand with him. Imagine what that would be like. Imagine if you were that sheriff suffering the slings and arrows of these people in the media, and then having the people stand with you and saying, no. We're going to stand for what's right. We don't care. It's not, all the police aren't bad. None of that nonsense. You do what the Constitution says, and we will support you. And I can, just the thought of it would bring a tear to my eye. I can't imagine what it would be like. Josh says, health departments are issuing mask orders. All right, here's the first thing you have to look at. And I go through this in Monday's article. Look in your state constitution. You want to look at either the Bill of Rights or Declaration of Rights, because you want to understand what your rights are. And your state constitution. Don't always rely on the federal constitution. Start with the state constitution. Look for what's called a non-delegation clause. Basically, you want to look for something that says no one branch of government can exercise the powers of another branch of government. Now you can look at it and say, okay, the third thing you want to look at is the emergency powers laws, and find out if the emergency powers acts are delegating legislative power to the executive, because health departments are part of the executive branch. The reason I want you to look at those three things is, first of all, it is part of the federal constitution. It's part of almost all, if not all, state constitutions. You cannot be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. Mass mandates deprive you of liberty without due process of law, unless they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are a danger to others and get a court to verify it. They have no authority to make you wear a mask in public. I'm not talking about private organizations, Walmart, your local businesses. I'm talking about public, right? That is illegal. It's unconstitutional. It is void. By the way, I have not, the only places I've worn a mask is in private businesses that have asked me to, right? I do not wear one in public. Doesn't happen. Then you look at the non-delegation, because what you're trying to recognize is a lot of the Emergency Powers Acts are ridiculously broad, and I think we really need to review them. But what you want to find is this, because basically the idea is, in an emergency, the legislature is slow. They're designed to be slow. They're supposed to be slow. If you need something to happen fast, you need it in the executive. So the idea is, okay, we declare an emergency and we're going to let the executive do some stuff because they can do it really, really quickly. The question is how much and how broadly. The important point in the Michigan case was one of their two Emergency Powers Acts gave the governor, when they declared an emergency, gave them the power to effectively enact laws indefinitely. There was no time limit on it. And that was the key. Without a time limit, that was an unconstitutional delegation of power. So that's why I want you to look for delegation of powers. And then third, let's look at the Emergency Powers Act and let's look at them logically and rationally and say, wait a second, do we really want a governor to say, oh, yep, there's an emergency, now I can do all these things that I want, without any sort of restriction? That's what you want to look at, and that's why I say look at those. Principle over party. Gee, I wonder where I've heard that before, Dustin. That's a Chris Ann Hall line. Josh, you're in Michigan. That like I said, the article, the video hits Monday. In fact, I just finished editing the video this afternoon, so it'll be up there. It'll publish on Monday. Read it, Josh. Hopefully, you'll find a lot of good information on it. Departments are actually issuing recommendations, and then all of them do sleight of hand by using the words like mandate, rule of law, all arguing with the guy blocking the door at the store. Brody, I think I know what you're saying, and I agree. Here's the part that really bothers me. Yes, we have certain cities and certain states that have issued these illegal, overarching, broad mandates. What really scares me, what really concerns me is the private banning. In other words, I go down to Walmart, I go to Kroger, I go to my barber, I go to a lot of places, and they have signs that say, you must wear a mask. Now, the government didn't do this. In many cases, the government may not even be forcing the businesses to do this. So now we have businesses that are promoting these mask mandates. They are doing it based on recommendations from experts. By the way, most of these experts are bureaucrats. So in effect, you have a pseudo mask mandate because all these businesses have said, well, gee, we're just going to issue the mask mandate because that's what's expected of us. I personally, I love to watch auto racing. I love Formula One, and I love IMSA, sports car, IndyCar, and I see all these people wearing these masks. They've got the really long boom microphones. So they don't want people anywhere near them. I'm looking at young, healthy people. Most of these drivers are in their 20s. You get to be 40 as a driver, you're ancient. these men are athletes. They are in excellent physical condition. Their chances of getting seriously ill and even dying from COVID-19 are in fractions of a percent. But you see, we've all been made scared, and we're reacting out of fear rather than out of ration. I had a doctor's appointment earlier this week, and I was talking to the nurse, and she's like, "Yeah, you look at this. We're dealing it based on fear, and what's happening is this fear that's being promulgated by the media, by governments, is getting businesses to take overreactions. And I think we really need to have, I don't want to call it an underground economy, but I think we need to start thinking about ways, how would we do business? How would we survive if these large corporations, these businesses, suddenly required you to show your immunization papers before they let you in the door? If they require you to, I've only had 3 places that I've been required to wear a mask by a private organization. One was an airline, one was a doctor's office. By the way, not the doctor's office I went to earlier this week, a different doctor's office. And one was a blood draw center. Only 3. But what happens if your grocery store says, "Oh, well, you have to show that you've gotten the COVID vaccine before we'll let you in"? What would you do? I think we need to make some preparations. Not fear mongering, not doomsday, but I think we need to start considering, because if it's not COVID, it's going to be something else. So, that's that part of it. So, isn't it the business's choice? Kind of like the no shirt, no shirt. Well, yes and no. So, Bobby, constitutionally, it is the business's choice. Yes, if the business wants you to wear a mask, that is, if it's a private business, they have every authority to do that. If the private business wants you to get vaccinated before you come in, they have every right to do that. That's not my question. My question is, what do we do have we thought about what would happen if that becomes the case? There's an old thought, the body won't go where the mind hasn't been. Rather than waiting for it to happen, let's think about what would we do if. Because if we have a thought of what we would do if we can plan for it before it becomes an emotional reaction, we have a much better chance of coming up with better ideas. It's my concern, again, with businesses doing it is not their right to do it. It's, we've seen that they will react out of fear rather than out of science and logic and reason. Now that we know this, are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for the next fear event that will cause stores to shut down or just people to empty the shelves? Like I said, I live in Tennessee, right? They even talk about there being snow. Milk, eggs, and bread disappear from the grocery store. Now, I'm prepared for that. Now I want to think about, well, what happens if I can't go to my local grocery store? Can I find maybe another store that might be more open or available? Yes, self-sufficient, or at least somewhat prepared. If we think about it beforehand, like I said, whether it's I'm going to have some extra food and stuff on hand just in case, or maybe I want to have a relationship with a local businesses that say that we agree philosophically, and if the big stores go, I want to make sure I can do business with this guy. I'd much rather do business with, my local barber's name is Virgil, right? Cool. I want to deal with Virgil. I don't want to deal with Supercuts. I want to deal with Virgil because I can talk to Virgil and we can have a reasonable, rational conversation. So, yes, reading the local recommendations, printing for yourself is helpful. Well, and bro, it's not just the exemptions. a classic example, right? So everyone says, oh, well, the CDC recommends masks. So guess what? I found the CDC recommendation, and yep, it recommends. It's funny because it says there's no evidence that children K through 12 transmit COVID. No studies have found it, but they still recommend that everyone 2-year-olds and over wear a mask. To me, that's irrational. That's not science. That's irrational. But I went a little farther. See, it said we base this on 2 studies, one from the Journal of the American Medical Association, one from the CDC itself. So I found them. The one from the Journal of the American Medical Association dealt with one hospital in one city. It said masks may help slow the spread. It said we focus mostly on KN95 and more than surgical masks and others. But it said that they had low confidence in that prediction. So not only does it say may, which is already a qualification, we're not really confident in that may. Now, let me ask you, if you walked up to an airplane and said, we may get to the destination city in one piece, but we're not really confident in that, would you get on the airplane? Then I went to the CDC report and I looked at that, and I just glanced at it fairly briefly, but I looked and I said, gee, that report is based on 2 hairdressers and 1 salon. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, we're not dealing with double-blind testing. We're not dealing with large with large sample sizes. We're not dealing with control groups. We're dealing with anecdotal evidence. And the CDC, which everyone claims is using science, is using anecdotal evidence to make recommendations that contradict their very own conclusions. And remember, the website is cdc.gov. The CDC is an organization, it's a part of the federal government. It's not, I don't believe it's directly an agency, but it's a spinoff of the federal government. Yeah. All right, let's see. It's 20 minutes of 9 here where I am. I've been talking for a while. I love these questions. By the way, let me know. Put in the comments, do you like the new schedule where I'm doing live streams every other week? I'm doing the second and fourth Thursday of the month. I love the engagement. I think this is a lot more involved. I think this is a lot better way of doing things than me just putting up videos and answering comments when they come up. I like this format. You know what else I would like? And if you can, I think the events may have gotten screwed up when I went to the new restreaming service that I'm using. I will work very hard to redo the event so that you can find the tickets. If you sign up, or if you go to constitutionstudy.com/calendar, if you sign up for the Constitution Study live class, you'll get a link, you'll get a reminder, but you'll also get a link to the Zoom room. And the nice thing about the Zoom room is I can actually put you on and we can talk to each other, which I think is really nice. So let me know. I am going to ask a couple things as we're getting to a point of wrapping up here. I do want to let you know things have really been pretty tight. Just so you know, my business plan for 2020 got shot to hell by the lockdowns. My plan this year was to go to a lot of in-person events. I was going to go to homeschool conferences and other meetings and groups and stuff like that to try and spread the word about the Constitution Study, get some interest in the Constitution Study, maybe sell some books and keep myself afloat for the Constitution Study. That's been shot to hell. I'm trying to get to more in-person events, but there are a couple things you can do to help me if you're interested. If you want to become part of what we're doing here, one is please share, right? These videos, the articles I put up, they are all free for you to use and to share. Share them far, share them wide. Hopefully, as we talked about, helping our neighbors understand, help our families understand. Hopefully there's some resources here you can use. Please do that. That helps tremendously. if you want to see this, and the reason I bring this up is this takes time and this takes effort and this takes money. If you want to help make sure the podcast keeps going, go to the website, constitutionsstudy.com. You'll see a donate button on the right-hand side. Anything you donate there goes to keeping the Constitution Study running. It pays for my hosting. It pays for the different services that help me get this information out and share it to as many places as possible. If you found value and you want to help support that, that is a great way to do that. I appreciate it greatly. You can do a one-time gift. You can do a donation. You can do a recurring. I have a gentleman who every month he donates. He sets it up automatically through PayPal. It helps. I appreciate that. If you want to help me in the work that I'm doing, right? So the donate covers the podcasting. But if you want to help me, and that is the books that I'm writing, the events that I'm going to, probably the biggest hindrance to me going to events right now is covering the travel expenses. I've had the wonderful opportunity this year to go up to North Dakota twice. And they were because they were able to cover my travel expenses. I appreciate them doing that. If we want to, if you want me to be able to come to other places around the country, I am willing to travel if I can get my travel expenses covered. Then that part of that, the part of the way you can help do that is actually buying stuff at the store. So at the store, I've got books. I've got a new shirt. I have my little logo on here. I'm putting some more up there. I'm playing around with a couple of designs, and I'm still working on it. But anything you buy from the store helps the Constitution Study itself keep running, as opposed to just the podcast, right? It helps keep me able to do this work. It helps keep me focused on this work rather than having to take other jobs that take me away from this in order to keep food on the family table. So I would appreciate that if you really want to become a part of what's going on here. The best way you can do that is to become a Constitution Scholar. It's a membership program. It's $5 a month. It's $50 a year. One or the other. It gives you free access to all my digital media. So all the digital versions of my books, classes that I've put on, everything is available if you become a member. You get access to, we have a Slack page where you can get better access to me. We do some, I've done a couple of scholar only events that have been lightly attended. I'd love to see more. If I get some more people involved, we can do some interesting events, maybe discuss different topics, whatever. That's how you can become a part of the Constitution Study and help support the work that we're doing beyond just the podcast. Any and all those things that you could do would help me greatly, and I would truly appreciate it. Hopefully you found value in what I'm bringing here. A lot of you said, thank you, you appreciate it. And I love, that keeps the wind in the sails. It's the last 2 years that I've been doing this full time have really been enjoyable. It's been a passion. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I want to keep it going. So share, ask questions, invite me to come speak. I love speaking to groups. I love going to different places. And if it involves travel, if I can get 2 or 3 in a single trip, that makes life so much better. Most of all, the fact that there are people that are starting to see the importance of the Constitution, what we can do with it, really makes a difference. It sounds like you really like the new schedule. Like there are several people who like what's been going on here. I hope you're watching the videos that I pre-record. I hope you're reading the articles. I'm glad you were here tonight. I want to thank you very much for spending this time with me. I know we're all busy. Most of us have families. We have things we want to do. This is almost 2 hours out of your day that you decide to spend with me. I truly appreciate it. I hope you found it worthwhile. And I hope that we'll all see each other again the next time when we get together here at the Constitution Study. Thanks.